Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. If you're a skeptic like me, their easy customer service and detailed reports make the whole interaction transparent and safe. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. Not to mention an easy-to-use and great online buy list. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG Sealed and Singles will be 5% off. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest deck. So be sure to use the code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order. Today's patron shoutout goes to Andrew Harala. Thanks Andrew for supporting me through Patreon. Hey gang, and welcome back. In today's game we have Kevin, Max, and Mika joining me, with Kevin playing his Isperia Christmas deck, which is a budget deck. He's keeping Celestial Colonnade, Island, 2 Plains, Windreader Sphinx, True Conviction, and Hushbringer. Max is playing his Yedora deck, keeping an Arid Archway, 4 Forests, Gaia's Gift, and 6. Mika is playing Sidar Jibari, keeping Unbreakable Formation, Godless Shrine, Swamp, Prairie Stream, Conjurer's Mantle, and a Wintermoor Commander. Last but not least, I am playing my upgraded Omo deck, keeping March of Velasvel, Planar Nexus, Forest, Guild Summit, Simic Signet, Seagate, and Sunken Palace. Max wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Forest. Kevin plays a tap Celestial Colonnade. I draw and play a Sunken Palace, passing to Mika. Mika plays a tap Godless Shrine. Max has a Forest and nothing else. Kevin's got an Island for turn, and he casts Hushbringer, almost completely shutting off Max's deck. I've got a Forest for turn, and cast Simic Signet, passing to Mika. Mika plays a Swamp, and is able to cast his Wintermoor Commander, passing to Max after it resolves. Max draws and plays a Crawling Barrens. He's then got enough mana for 6, and passes. Kevin plays a Plains for turn, and pays 1 for a Wayfarer's Bauble. Moving to combat, he pokes me for 1, and then passes turn. I've got a Planar Nexus as my land for turn, and cast Omo. I don't get the Enter the Battlefield trigger though sadly because of Hushbringer, and I have to pass after that. Mika's got a Plains, and he then casts Conjurer's Mantle, and he goes to combat. He swings the commander at Kevin, who takes the hit for 3. Mika reveals Hakon off the trigger, and then passes to Max. Max draws and plays a Dryad Arbor. He then goes to combat, swinging 6 at Kevin. He gets to mill 3, and he puts a land to his hand. And he then retraces Elvish Mystic from his graveyard, and passes turn. Kevin's got a Plains, and he casts Sunscorched Regent. Going to combat, he pokes Mika with the Hushbringer this time, dealing 1 and gaining 1, and passing. I draw, casting Guild Summit, and tapping my Planar Nexus to draw a card, while Kevin's Regent gets a +1/+1 counter, and he gains a life. I then play a Seagate, and draw another card, and pass. Mika plays a Prairie Stream, and then goes to combat, swinging the Wintermoor Commander at Max, and he loots away Hakon. Max then takes 3, and Mika reveals Elenda and Azor off the Mantle trigger. In his post-combat main phase, he then plays Sidar Jibari and passes. Max draws and plays a Forest. He goes to combat, swinging 6 at me this time around. He mills his 3 but misses his land, and I then move to block with Omo. They bounce off each other, and in his post-combat main phase, Max retraces World Shaper from his graveyard, casting it after discarding a land, and passes to Kevin. Kevin draws and plays an Island, and then casts True Conviction. Going to combat, he swings the Sunscorched Regent, who's gotten huge at this point, at me, and the Hushbringer at Max. Max responds by casting Gaia's Gift on the World Shaper, and uses it to block the Hushbringer. I sadly have no blocks though, and take 16, while Kevin gains a total of 18, After that, Kevin passes. I play Open the Gates, and the Regent gains a +1/+1 counter, and Kevin gains 1, and I go search for a Basilisk Gate. I then play an Urza's Cave, and go to combat. I swing Omo at Kevin, and put an everything counter onto my forest, and Kevin takes 1 commander damage. I then pass turn. Mika draws and moves the Conjurer's Mantle to Sidar Jibari, and then goes to combat. He swings Sidar at Kevin for 5, draws a card and discards a card to the Eminence trigger, and then reveals Murderous Rider off the Conjurer's Mantle trigger. He then connects, reanimating Elenda and Azor off Sidar Jibari's ability. In his second main phase, he plays a Marsh Flats, and then moves to his end step. He pays 4 life, making 2 Vampire Knight tokens from Elenda and Azor, and passes turn. Max draws and goes to combat. He swings the World Shaper and 6 at Kevin, milling 6 cards total. Kevin then takes the full hit for 6, and after combat, Max retraces Panoptic Projector, getting Kevin's Regent a +1/+1 counter and gaining him 1, and he then activates it to retrace Inox Survivalist face down. He then also retraces Fyndhorn Elves and passes to Kevin. Kevin draws and goes to combat. He swings the Sunscorch Regent at Max, and Max responds by flipping up the Inox Survivalist, blowing up True Conviction and the Conjurer's Mantle. He can't block though, and still takes a pretty big hit. In his post-combat main phase, Kevin casts Isperia and passes. During his end step, I sacrifice Urza's Cave and go and find Baldur's Gate. As it comes in, I draw a card from Guild Summit. I draw and play a Basilisk Gate, and draw another card. I then cast Nature's Lore, going to find a forest. And once it's out, activate Baldur's Gate, making 4 blue. I pay 3 for Propaganda, gaining Kevin 1 and his Regent a +1/+1 counter, and then play Wonderscape Sage, and he gets it again. I then pass, and during my end step, Mika casts Swift End on the Sunscorch Regent, losing some life to deal with a troublesome dragon. He then loses another life, sacrificing the Marsh Flats to find a Sunken Hollow. Mika's turn has him drawing and going straight to combat. He swings Elenda and Azor at Kevin, and Sidar goes at Max. This gets him an Eminence trigger, drawing a card and discarding Eastern Paladin, and then they connect, and he gets to bring the Eastern Paladin back. In his post-combat main phase, Mika plays a Solemn Simulacrum, going to find a Plains and passing. Max draws and casts Yedora, and then goes to combat. He swings the World Shaper at Mika, who blocks with the Solemn Simulacrum. The Solemn dies, drawing Mika a card, and with nothing else, Max passes. Kevin draws and plays Peek, targeting Max so he can look at his hand. He then casts Steel of the Godhead and puts it onto Isperia. Going to combat, Isperia goes at Max, who takes the hit for 5. Kevin correctly names Living Lands since he got to peek at Max's hand, and he gets to tutor for a Selfless Spirit. He then casts it and passes to me. I draw and play an Oracle of Moldiah, hitting 2 lands off the top as I play an Island and then a Lazotep Quarry. I then go to combat, swinging Omo at Kevin. I get to put an everything counter onto my island, and he then takes the 1. In my second main phase, I cast Finale of Revelation for 5, drawing 5, and once it resolves, cast Soul Ring and pass. Mika draws and goes to combat. He swings his team at Kevin, drawing and discarding a card thanks to the Sidar Jibari's Eminence ability, and we see a Herald of Hoofbeats go into his graveyard. Kevin then takes the hit, and Mika reanimates the Herald. In his second main phase, he then activates Western Paladin, destroying Yedora, and after that, Mika passes. Max draws and recasts Yedora, and then goes to combat. He swings 6 at Mika, and he gets to mill 3, revealing a land to put to hand. Mika just chumps with a Vampire Knight token, and with nothing else, Max passes. Kevin draws and plays a Dungeon Geists, which as it comes in, taps down the Western Paladin to try and get some good favor with Max. Going to combat, he swings Isperia at Max, since he still knows at least 1 card in hand, naming living lands again. This lets Kevin then tutor up for a Watcher of Spheres, which after he finds it, plays it, and passes to me. I draw and play a forest. I draw and play a Rogue's Passage and then a forest. And then activate Baldur's Gate, making a bunch of mana, and then activate Basilisk Gate and target Omo to pump it up. I then cast Ghostly Flicker, blinking the Basilisk Gate and Baldur's Gate so they'll come back in untapped. Drawing 2 off the Guild Summit, and then activating them both again to make a bunch of mana and pump Omo up even more. I swing Omo at Mika, but sadly he responds with a Swords to Plowshares on her. I respond to this by activating my Wonderscape Battle Mage, drawing a card, but not finding an answer. This is Omo getting exiled, and I jump back up to 36 life. In my post-combat main phase, I then cast Nephalia Smuggler and pass. Mika draws and goes to combat. He swings out at Max again and loots off Sidar Jibari's ability. Max can't block and dies. And Mika gets to bring back Hakon with Sidar's ability after connecting. In his post-combat main phase, Mika then casts Marshal of Zhalfir and passes to Kevin. Kevin draws and casts a Duelist Heritage. Kevin then goes to combat, giving Isperia double strike thanks to the Heritage, and goes at Mika. He misses a blind call on the first strike damage, but is able to name a card on the regular damage. This lets Kevin then tutor for a Whispermare, which he then evokes, destroying my propaganda to hopefully have Mika attack me instead of Kevin. I draw playing Matter Gate off the top, which draws a card as it enters. I then replay a Planar Nexus, drawing again. I recast Omo, putting an everything counter onto another forest, and then activate my Nephalia Smuggler to flicker Omo, and as it comes back in, put a counter onto the Sunken Palace. I then activate Baldur's Gate to give me enough mana to activate Rogue's Passage and Basilisk Gate on my Oracle of Moldiah. I swing it at Mika, and he can't block, taking 12, and I then pass turn. Mika plays a Tainted Isle for his turn, and in his main phase, casts an Unbreakable Formation, giving his team Indestructible, Vigilance, and a +1/+1 counter, and after it resolves, moves to combat. He decides to go all out at me. Mika gets to draw and discard a card, pitching Adeline off Sidar Jibari's trigger, and it then connects, and he brings her back. His team then connects, and I die, and Sidar Jibari brings Adeline back, and he passes to Kevin. Kevin draws and animates his Celestial Colonnade, and he goes to combat. He swings out, giving Isperia double strike, and Mika blocks the Selfless Spirit with Sidar Jibari, and the Colonnade with Elenda and Azor, but offers to take the rest. Before damage, Kevin sacrifices the Selfless Spirit to make his team indestructible, and Kevin correctly names a card in Mika's hand, getting 2 Isperia tutor triggers. His first one finds a Siren Stormtamer, and then a Skyhunter Strike Force off the second. In his post-combat main phase, Kevin then casts the Stormtamer and passes. Mika draws and plays a Plains. He goes to combat, swinging at Kevin. All of his knights have horsemanship, so Kevin can't block, and Mika gets to draw and discard a card before moving to damage. Kevin then takes 37, but is still at a pretty decent life total thanks to all that lifelink he had, and with nothing else, Mika passes. Kevin plays a Plains for turn, and then moves to cast a Glenalendra Archmage. But with it on the stack, Mika casts Despark and targets Isperia in response. Kevin then sacrifices the Siren Stormtamer, countering it, and the Archmage then resolves. Kevin then goes to combat, but Mika's ready, using the Marshal of Zhalfir to tap down Isperia. This means that Mika will survive, and he's threatening a lethal crackback, and Kevin knows when he's beat and scoops it up. Game review time. This game was 1 hour, 45 minutes, and 21 seconds. And honestly, a lot of it was us just talking. With Kevin leaving, we were all just kind of catching up and discussing his future plans, which was really nice, and I had a really great time. His Isperia deck was also a really great time, and considering the fact that it was a Christmas deck with our limit of about 50 USD, it held its own really, really well. That True Conviction was gross. That enchantment is so powerful. Giving everything double strike and lifelink is just bonkers. I'm surprised I don't see it more in white decks, although I guess not a lot of people I play with play mono white or white adjacent kind of decks. In the flip side, his deck really shut down Yedora. Basically, that Hushbringer denied Yedora's ability completely, which meant that Max's commander was utterly useless and just sat in the command zone for most of the game. I think the World Shaper and 6 did more for Max than anything else in his deck, and he really only got to turn one creature face up, which was the Inox Survivalist. Mika's Knight deck was brutal. I think Sidar Jibari is a well-designed commander in Esper, especially considering if you want to build it Kindred, there is just so much packaged into his ability. He gives you draw and discard, which feeds into his second ability of reanimation, which is nuts. And there are so many good Night Lords. The ones like that pump, that tap, Adeline's a really good, well actually she's not even a Lord, but she's just really good. And the fact is, it's just aggressive. It's a very aggressive deck. There's a lot of draw, and that horsemanship was absolutely backbreaking. No one could deal with it. No one seemed to have any removal for it, and Mika was just able to attack unhindered. Omo was, I want to say good. I've played a lot of landfall decks lately. It seems to be my fixation right now. And I think Omo actually might be the best Gates commander. I've seen people build her or them either as sort of focused around Lords, so heavily emphasis on the Changeling / everything counter on the creature side, or basically Gates. I think Gates is really fun. I think it's a really good excuse to build them. It's easier to hit stuff like Maze's End because you can move the counters around onto lands. Oh, I almost got through the whole thing in one shot. And considering it only has 2 colors, I would rather play this than a 5-color deck like Kenrith or even Golos. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.